Hey, what's up, guys? This is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with a new feature that we're starting up that we're calling our NBA DraftKings Daily Pivots. The idea of the Daily Pivots is, as you guys know, we've reached that point in the season where a lot of teams are starting to sit some guys out. You know, there's a lot of guys that are injured and just don't want to push it at this point in the season, either saving themselves for the playoffs or realizing that their team's not going to make the playoffs, so there's no chance of risking further injury. So every day we're getting a whole bunch of these $3,000 and $4,000 guys that are popping up, putting up big numbers, and they're really guys that you have to have if you want to win a tournament. Now, right now, we do these videos around 12 o'clock noon, so there's still 7 hours before tip-off. And as you know, the last hour before tip-off, there's a lot of news that comes up. So what we do here at RotoCurve, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we run a show called Daily Pivot, where 4 or 5 of us will be on here live between 5 and 6, kind of going over some of our favorite plays, talking about some of the injury news, talking about what you can expect out of the guys who are being subbed in for those injured players. So what I wanted to do now is kind of give you guys a few of the people who we're looking at the moment, guys who we're seeing how the injury news is going to work out, because we think that they could have some big upside if it does work out in their favor. So let's call up the slideshow and give you guys a little better idea of what we're talking about here. Two of the guys that I want to talk about here today are Brandon Jennings and Ray McCollum. Now, Brandon Jennings is $3,700 in a high-paced game versus the Charlotte Hornets, and Elf Payton has been out the last couple games. He sat out again last night, and Jennings came back and had a really good game yesterday. He played more minutes than C.J. Watson, for those of you who were worried about how that would break itself down with both of them being healthy. Watson played about 27 minutes. I think Jennings played about 28 minutes, so he's the one who saw a little more of the playing time on the court. Now, he's very cheap, and yesterday he put up 35 fantasy points. I don't expect him to repeat that in this matchup against Charlotte, but I do think he can get you 25 to 30. If he gets you 25 to 30 at 3,700, that's going to be like 8 times value and make him one of the better value plays in the day. If you don't have some of these guys that are getting 8x value, it's really tough to win a tournament because you're not able to pay up for some of the guys that you want that, you know, can get you 50 or 60 fantasy points and still give you 6 or 7 times value. And also, if you're getting a guy who's giving you 8 times value, he's actually giving you some added benefit over what you would need to get to 300 and have a roster that has a chance to make some money. So this way, if you have a guy that only goes 5x or, you know, a guy that underperforms a little bit, you know, having one of these guys like Jennings who went, you know, 10x last night, basically, you know, he's giving you an extra 10 to 12 points that can help add to the guy who underperformed a little. And it might help make you reach value and get to that 300 and, you know, wind up getting yourself a cash. Another guy who might be in a similar situation is Ray McCollum. He's in a high total and a high-paced game against the Minnesota Timberwolves, and it looks like Connolly's going to be out again for this one. So if Connolly's out, one of the things we like about McCollum is they really only have like a 7-man rotation right now. They do not have a lot of bodies on the bench, so you know you're going to get minutes out of everybody. He looked like he was having a bad game and then came in the fourth quarter and had like 12 or 14 points to wind up reaching, you know, decent 6 times value. I think he does have upside. He had 27 points the game before. He's not somebody that I really love, though. If I had to choose between Jennings and McCollum, it's easily going to be Jennings for me. McCollum's probably the guy I have the lowest on this totem pole of guys that I'm looking at here today. The one punt play I have him above is Tony Douglas, but other than that, I don't really like any of these you know, cheap point guards below the $3,700 threshold. The next guy I want to talk about is Marcus Smart at 4,100. He's in a high total game versus OKC with Boston OKC total being at 220. I think OKC's favored by about 4. And Smart has been starting at the small forward spot lately with Jay Crowder out. He's consistently seen 25 to 28 minutes when Crowder was in and was putting up like 20 to 25 fantasy points. I think he's going to get an uptick of about 3 to 5 minutes. I think we saw him play 32.5 yesterday. So the 28 to 33 minute range is kind of where I like to see Smart. I think at that range, he has a floor of about 5x because I do think he's going to get you at least 20 fantasy points. And we've seen him in 30 minutes give you upside of 35, 40 fantasy points. So for 4,100, that would be an upside of like 8 to 10K with a pretty safe floor of 5x. So I really like to use Marcus Smart. You know, he's going to be somebody that I have in my lineups. I especially like the fact that he had only 23 fantasy points yesterday, which wasn't a huge outperformance game. I think it's going to keep some people off of him, but I do think that he's somebody I want to have some exposure to. Another guy who's a small forward option, shooting guard option, depending what site you're playing on, is Doug McDermott, Dougie McBuckets. High-paced game versus the Washington Wizards for him in Chicago here. Now, with Dunleavy out, he basically sees a ton of the minutes at the small forward spot. The two of them were kind of splitting them up, but with no Dunleavy, all those minutes wind up going to McDermott. Now, with Pau Gasol out and D Rose likely out too, you're taking two of the highest usage guys off of Chicago, as well as Dunleavy, who's another guy who played some decent minutes and took a couple shots. So Chicago needs somebody to score. They need guys that can shoot. They need guys that can put points up on the board. McDermott had 29 points in his last game. I think he had 30-something fantasy points overall, 29 real-life points he scored. And he's got 10-plus real-life points in 9 of his last 12 games. So he is somebody that can put points up on the board, and I think they're going to give him more minutes and more shots, more attempts to do so, especially if they're going to be without guys like Pau and D Rose and even Dunleavy. With Dunleavy out, that's what makes his minutes safe. With Pau and Derrick Rose out, that's what makes his shot his shot attempts go up. So if all three of those guys are out, I think it's a perfect storm and a really good spot to roll out Doug McDermott again. Now, remember, we have no idea at this point in time which of these guys are going to be out and which of these guys won't be. And that's why over here at RotoCurve, we started a show called the Daily Fantasy Pivot. From 5 to 6 o'clock Eastern time, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So up to an hour before lock, you'll have myself, Josh Kalachi, guys like Nick Mencio from Roto World, and Jimmy McCormick from over at ESPN, and Ricky Sanders, who has been doing some writing for us over here and runs a lot of the stuff over at Fantasy Draft. You're gonna have you're gonna have a chance to sit down and ask some questions and chat. We go over some of our favorite plays, and we also go over the latest injury news. So if you're wondering which of these guys is definitely going to be out and which ones get upgraded and which ones get downgraded based on who's playing, that's the idea of the show. We try to come on here and give you guys the latest news so that when you go to make your final lineups, you can make some lineups that make you some money. So if you're around tonight, like I said, these are the guys that have been helping you win tournaments lately. So definitely come check us out on the Pivot, and we'll try to point you in the right directions of which one we think are going to help you win some money tonight. So as always, this has been Benny Ricciardi with RotoCurve.com. Thank you guys for joining us here. Stay classy, DFS.